Wait, let's see. I'm putting my stuff on Do Not Disturb. Oh, we are live.
Yes, we are.
Hi, happy Wednesday. Dan, Adam, welcome to the Saratoga podcast.
Good afternoon. We missed you last week. We had a nice chat with our Commissioner of Public Safety. That was very interesting, Dan, don't you think?
Yeah, it was good. I like when we get any of the commissioners on, and it's important, right? It's important that the constituents get to hear from them directly.
Oh, I totally agree. And I actually appreciate the willingness of most of the city council members to come on and chat. Of course, I was totally bummed that I wasn't there. I was having a little bit of podcast FOMO.
Well, we missed you, and we had a great talk. But today we have another commissioner on. Is that correct?
We do. And although I have to say, you guys, I just want to say one more time, it's been a while since the three of us have been together. So I'm happy to have the gang back. Like the trio back in town. I'm happy. I guess this means that summer's coming to rolling slowly to an end if we're all kind of back in town. Although I am wondering where Dan D. Federici is in the world.
I am. Well, Robin, I was terrified of the wrath you would give me if my Wi-Fi wouldn't work correctly. So I went out to seek a good location with adequate Wi-Fi. And I'm not even going to tell you where I am. I'm just going to show you. Okay. Let me flip the old laptop around, see if you can figure out. Hopefully you can do the math.
Oh, wow. Little humble brag there.
I am in the press box at the Saratoga Racecourse. It is so beautiful here this morning. Folks, for those of you that are like me and you don't get here till 1:30, 1:45, come here at 11 a.m. when the gates open. You step back in time. Time slows down then. It is so pleasant here in the morning. It's pleasant here on a Wednesday and a Thursday too. I used to be all about the weekend, the big stakes, the excitement, the TV, this, that. I'm telling you, Wednesday or Thursday is underrated here at Saratoga Racecourse. Yes, I'm plugging them, but it's absolutely the truth.
Dan, who'd you have to fool to think you were actual press to get in there? Huh?
I explained, hey, I do a lot. If you go to Saratoga Report, there is a lot of horse racing press on there. And on the desktop version on the far right column, I spent a lot of time aggregating horse racing news.
Yeah, but
you got to get you one of those fedoras with like a press thing on it and a feather, and man, you'd be all set. But wow, that's awesome. Good for you for being there, and a couple more weeks of racing left. So glad you take advantage of it.
Yes,
hey,
yeah, exactly. And the weather hopefully will hold.
Before we get into everything, I just want to remind everybody, I have our live call feature up. Hopefully I still remember how to work it. If you want to call and comment on anything we're talking about today, feel free. The number is 518-290-0676. I'll pop that number up periodically throughout the podcast, but feel free to call and weigh in. We'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, we have a lot to talk about. Let's just dive right in, guys. So on Sunday, I was at the Not On Our Watch rally. I don't know. I don't think either one of you guys were able to make it. But it was a rally.
I was not.
It was a rally in response to, I dislike calling the Proud Boys because I think they like it when their name is used. So I'm just going to refer to them as white supremacists. So it was a rally in response to the white supremacist march that happened 2 Saturdays ago. And it was really great to see such a big turnout. There were probably 150 people there, which was just awesome. And what I didn't realize was there were a lot of speakers. So it was a little bit more speaker heavy versus just kind of like a demonstration with holding signs, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the speakers were really great. They were inspirational. They were talking about people. For instance, there's a business in Boston Spa that I encourage everyone to go and support called Sage Liquor. And the owner of Sage Liquors, the white supremacists 2 weekends ago, I think were going into her store, and she just kind of inadvertently, like it was just kind of an instinct, gave them the finger. And I think they got a photo of her doing that, and they like trolled her social media. They wrote horrible reviews about her business. They harassed her. They were calling her, like she just kind of went through hell because of that. And so I just want to like get that out there. Sage Liquors, in Ballston Spa, go and just show up and support her small business, because no one should have to go through that kind of like hell that she went through just for having that kind of like basic human response to what is essentially a hate group. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And her name was brought up at the rally on Sunday, and she got a huge round of applause for what she had gone through and what she had done. I would say the only kind of like minor things about it that caught me a little bit off guard was that it was a little bit more political than I anticipated. I anticipated the mayor being there. Ron Kim was there. I anticipated him being there. I anticipated him speaking. I didn't anticipate him going after Jim Montanino the way he did. And again, I had horrible Wi-Fi last week. I didn't get to see the full interview you guys did with Jim, so I'm not totally up to speed on his position on what happened. But Mayor Kim said very vehemently that our current public safety commissioner has had at least 5 opportunities to essentially repudiate what this white supremacist group did and who they are, and he has never taken an opportunity to do so. And so the implication was that he is somehow sympathetic to them, or doesn't have a problem with them or what they represent. And then Mayor Kim went on to really hammer home, anyone who's running for office this fall, you have to get them on record about how they feel about this group and really pin them down and get them on record, because here we have someone on our city council who won't take an opportunity to repudiate them and what they stand for. And I was pretty taken aback by that, because I mean, maybe I'm just guessing here, but I can't imagine that Commissioner Montanino has any sympathy for this white supremacist group. But what did he say on the podcast last week? I mean, was there anything to indicate he did? Oh, we just lost you, Dan.
I put the mute on because of the background noise. And I do want to review it before I encapsulate what he said. Adam, if you know better than me. I think his tone was, of course, his tone was negative towards them, but in defense of what the mayor alleged, and I don't like that it's being politicized. I said last week, all 5 city council members should be standing in unison and talking amongst themselves at times. That I don't think is happening. They're talking via press release and press conference, and that's a problem. So I wish they would all talk. But if he has had it, if he hasn't affirmatively and strongly repudiated them, the Proud Boys that are clearly a racist group and a lot of other disgusting things, and some people are going to disagree with that. I've talked to some people. I was surprised some people that I know approached me and kind of downplayed the Proud Boys, but I disagree with that. But Commissioner Montanino should do that. But that doesn't justify, and you touched on it, Robin, here, the politicizing at a rally. That's not the place. That's not the place to do it. And I just wish they would talk amongst each other and find some unity on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, what I remember is in how Commissioner Montanino acted was stoic, almost like a judge. Essentially going through the facts of the timeline of what's happened and what the response was, not really passing judgment on any group or the actions, just what the law says, which in some cases is what you want your law enforcement agencies and arms to act impartial, regardless of politics. On the other hand, the Proud Boys are for me, it's not so much as white supremacy as trying to overthrow our government. So for me, they are anti-American, anti-Constitution, and so I think of all of them as you guys do. Maybe we've talked about this. The founder of the Proud Boys was of African American Cuban heritage. I'm not saying that doesn't make him racist, but for me, there are a despicable group that tried to overthrow our government. But the commissioner was really talking to what they did in their actions that day, and whether he missed an opportunity to denounce them. Certainly you can denounce hate groups, which they are. You can, if Al Qaeda bombed something, we would all denounce Al Qaeda, including all the way up to the president and whatnot, and in the Department of Justice. So I think that's acceptable, but that's not the path he took. He took a very stoic, judge-like tone.
I just have to say that, this idea that the founder of this group was not of pure white descent, being a way to kind of repudiate the idea that the Proud Boys aren't a racist organization. I just think it's kind of like a weak one, only in that like there's clearly so many different chapters of this group right now. And the way that they've evolved has clearly become a white supremacist organization, regardless of, I think, the heritage of its one and only founder. And so I sometimes find that argument to be like a bit weak, you know?
Right. And my issue is that I think especially the left is quickly devolves everything into being racist. But it's almost like it's almost sometimes you have an argument with somebody, and if you're a male and it's a female, you're now misogynistic. So anyway, that's not what we're about. We're about local politics. We all can agree on that it's a horrible group, regardless of the intricacies of what you want to say, why they're horrible.
Yeah.
They have no business, and I was glad to see people speaking out against them. Jim did not come out and from my knowledge, and specifically refute the Proud Boys, but in no terms did he support what they did or them as an organization.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up was that Gordon Boyd was also there. Gordon Boyd is running for Saratoga County Supervisor right now. He's running against, you can vote for 2 people for county supervisor, but the 3 people running are Matt Veach, who's been a county supervisor, I think now for 14 years, and former Finance Commissioner Michelle Madigan is also running for county supervisor. But Gordon Boyd was there on Sunday. He spoke, and one of the things he said, and this has nothing to do necessarily with this white supremacist group, it's entirely different. I don't know why he got on this subject, but he was talking about the County Board of Supervisors, and perhaps I have these numbers wrong, but he said that, and this is about the migrants being shipped here from New York City. As you both know, I'm very pro-migrant, so I'm like, come one, come all, we'll take care of you. I know that's kind of a controversial position, but that's just my personal position. Gordon Boyd said on Sunday that every 5 days, the County Board of Supervisors has taken a vote to prevent hotels and prevent the county from accepting migrants. And they've done this 18 times in a row since issuing some kind of emergency order when New York City first said they were going to start shipping migrants up here. And I was like really shocked and horrified to hear that our County Board of Supervisors would be re-upping this vote every 5 days to prevent hotels from accepting migrants. Like I was horrified, And so I went back and I got in touch with one of our current County Board of Supervisors, Tara Gaston. And I just found this interesting. I asked Tara Gaston exactly what I just posed to you guys. And her response was, no, there's been no vote. The only action taken was an emergency order put forward by Todd Kunzniers in his role as chair. So I don't know what that was all about. I'd really like further clarity on it because it's it was a very specific and egregious statement that Gordon Boyd made, making the county appear as if they every 5 days have been taking this like very heavy-handed vote. And if that's not the case, I think I'd really like clarification on it because that's an extraordinarily misleading statement to make.
Yeah, I agree with the local committee Democrats are they're good of recently of winning elections. They're good at getting their candidates, not missing any opportunity to get their candidates in front of a crowd or an audience. And they use this as an opportunity where there's 3 main races, that 3 competitive races for supervisor, for mayor, and for public safety. And Kristen Dart was there speaking at this event, and so they had their 3 candidates. They didn't miss an opportunity to get their 3 candidates in front of a crowd of people. Which again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's probably good politics, but it is kind of politicizing a otherwise grassroots event that was really supposed to be denouncing this hate group and not about promoting any particular candidates or politicians. But it is what it is, and the mayor's the mayor, and he does have the pulpit to do a lot of things like this. So it is his prerogative.
Just like you said, though, so Kristen Dart was there. She was speaking on behalf of someone else, but she was there. And like I said, Gordon Boyd was there. Moran Kim was there. You know who wasn't there? Tim Cole was not there. He's running for public safety. I think Chris Mathieson is actually traveling outside the country right now. John Safford wasn't there. Matt Veach wasn't there. Michelle Madigan wasn't there. There were candidates that I think should have been there that weren't there. And I guess there was some other event going on that some of them were at. But to me, when it comes to a rally like this, and if you're campaigning, it would have been a good opportunity to show your face, especially if you're running for public safety. I think it would have been a good opportunity to show your face. Jim Montanino wasn't there. Jason Golub wasn't there. Who else wasn't there? No one from Black Lives Matter was there. Not one person. And
in fairness to everybody you just mentioned, we don't know if they had just an impossible conflict.
Completely fair. They could have had a conflict. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you do make a good point that you can't really fault people for showing up when it matters, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it did get a fair amount of press. There were 150 people there. It was in response to something that we rarely, I think there's been one time several years ago when the KKK made an appearance in Saratoga. But aside from that, I can't think of any time in recent memory when like a known hate group has marched down Broadway. And so to me, it would have been a good opportunity to go stand there and let people know that this is something you're against.
I agree. And to Commissioner Montanino's point, if he has yet to vehemently repudiate this group and did miss that rally, there is a legitimate void there that, hey, Commissioner, what the hey? Why aren't we hearing from you? Why aren't you at this rally?
But so I also thought, so it's kind of going back a little bit, but the initial press release that the city council put out, I thought was kind of bananas about this. And I don't know if you guys read it. First of all, it was a 2-page press release.
The city council did not put it out. Sorry to interrupt you, Robin. They did not. 3 or 4 of them put it out. Commissioner Montanino pointed out last week he was not part of that.
Right. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So here's what it went out on the city of Saratoga Springs letterhead, I think maybe from the office of the mayor, perhaps. But it was a press release that came out from the city. And first of all, as I was going to say, the press person in me, if you go into a second page in a press release, it's too long. You got to do some editing. It's too long. You don't need a 2-page press release. And in this instance, it really was too long. It was kind of bananas. It started off with Ron Kim essentially blaming the police department for allowing this march to happen, which made my blood boil. It made me really, really angry.
What did you know and when did you know it kind of assertions?
Yeah. It kind of, like the insinuation to me when I was reading that was that maybe the police department knew and just didn't do anything about it and just let it happen. And I was kind of like, so I don't know if either of you guys saw this, saw the actual march happen. I was driving down to New York City, but a friend of mine who owns a boutique on Broadway called me, told me about it, and then FaceTimed me. So I like pulled over and I actually watched it like with my own eyeballs and saw it happening. And it was pretty brief. There were no major disruptions. No intersections were blocked. No traffic was blocked for any length of time that I saw when I was watching it. And so, and to be honest with you, this is going to sound so ridiculous, but some of the people who were in the store that my friend was calling from, they were older. They were kind of just like a group of little old ladies, and they couldn't fully see the march, but they were talking and they were like, "What's happening? I wonder what's happening. Who are those people?" And then they were like, "Oh, you know what? It must be a parade. They must be having a parade for Mary Lou Whitney." Literally, that's what they thought it was because they couldn't see and they just saw a little bit of a hubbub. So not a lot of people really noticed when this actually happened. And like, I hung up the phone after I saw it happen and I was calling people like, what the fuck just happened on Broadway? And people are like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Very few people noticed in the moment when it happened. And so when people are asking, there's a lot of, especially Democrats saying, why didn't the SSPD respond to this march the way they responded to the Black Lives Matter protests? And I just think that's a serious false equivalency. And I would love your opinions on this because essentially, you know, when I was public safety commissioner, when Black Lives Matter was protesting, it was a totally different situation. Their protests would last sometimes 4 or 5 hours. They would shut down intersections for long periods of time. They would shut down traffic for long periods of time. They would be putting the public in danger, and the public would be, because of the way that they were shutting down traffic and the way that they were engaging with the public and the way that the public was, quite frankly, engaging with them. It was a very hostile and unsafe, in my opinion, environment.
And Robin, sorry to interrupt you, but also pre-planned, as opposed to this one that was sudden and caught everybody off guard.
Well, yeah, the BLM ones were pre-planned, but it's not like they would let the city know or they would file a permit. The only reason that this police department would know is because the police department would follow their social media and see sometimes that something was planned. So they would have like a little bit of a heads up.
What we talked about, what we talked about last week was whatever your politics are. This is not you can have your politics, but how the Constitution is applied should be equal to all Americans, right? And so I agree with you, Robin, 100% that this was not the same destructive or disruptive protests that we've seen by the BLM protesters in the past. So it should not have been handled the same way. But we talked about Commissioner Montanino and our commission form of government of. Maybe again, we can talk to Commissioner Moran about this and maybe getting together and coming up with guidelines. And maybe there are guidelines, but just making sure that the guidelines are equally enforced, regardless of an individual's political beliefs. With that being said, yeah. I think we can label certain groups as terrorist groups or hate groups or other groups and use that to prevent them from marching on Broadway, as again, so long as it's equally applied. What's that? I'm sorry.
So I don't think so I used to work for the ACLU way back when. I don't think there's any tool that can be used to prevent someone from demonstrating whether they're a hate group or not, because I think it's a violation of their civil rights. But one of the other points that I just quickly wanted to make here is that there are a lot of people saying, especially on the left, saying, why didn't the police respond to the Proud Boys the same way they responded to Black Lives Matter? And my response to that is really simple, which is the response to the Black Lives Matter protests are now under investigation by the Attorney General's office. We all know this. There's an active investigation going on by the Attorney General into how the police handled the Black Lives Matter protest. Given that, why would they respond the same way to the Proud Boys marching down Broadway?
Or anybody, right?
Or anybody.
Yeah.
Like,
plus
hello.
The lawsuit. Plus the lawsuit that's going on.
Yeah. So like, so it's just like, I'm like, are you listening to what you're saying? Like, you didn't like the way the police handled the Black Lives Matter protests, but you want them to use the same response to this group, even though you're condemning how they acted with the Black Lives Matter protesters. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It's a bit of hypocrisy.
Yeah. Well, well stated, Robin. There's a lot of inconsistencies in that, and it just doesn't. It just this dog don't hunt. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Hey, we have Commissioner Moran.
This was pretty small, right? And listen, this was pretty small. It was quick. They were here and gone, like you pointed out, Robin. Other ones, were an hour long, perhaps. And this doesn't justify. Again, the three of us agree. This is a disgusting group. We don't want them here. And if there's a legal way to prevent that, and there may not be, but all the laws should be applied evenly, right? Because otherwise we're going to find ourselves in a lawsuit as a city, a constitutional case that you inhibited our First Amendment rights. But we should be enforcing those laws, right? Do it evenly. Don't do selective enforcement.
I agree. The problem is, you guys, and this is a question I still struggle with. I don't know I still don't know, after everything that's happened with every protest we've had in the city, when do you go in and end it because an intersection is being shut down or because things are potentially unsafe? When is the moment where you go in and shut it down? And like finding that balance between protecting people's constitutional right to protest, but also protecting public safety. It's an almost impossible balance to achieve perfectly, like truly almost impossible. And if you're going to try to shut down a demonstration, you're asking for a violent confrontation, like you just are. And so I just think it puts law enforcement or whoever is in charge in a really, really, really precarious position.
Your point, but they don't need to. Hopefully, shutting down is not the question. If they're violating the law, did not get a permit, or what have you, enforce it evenly. And if that means arrest following up afterwards, then that's fine.
So if it's not,
some prudence here.
We should ask Commissioner Moran this. He's not on the stream yet. When he gets on the stream, I will ask him this. I don't think that not filing for a permit is enough of a tool to shut down any kind of demonstration, because I mean, BLM never filed for a permit ever, not once.
Well, I'm not saying don't shut it down, but the fact is there can be charges levied after.
Oh yeah, afterwards. I don't know.
Yeah, but then you get politics involved, and you have a political AG who comes down and investigates, and that's where we are now, right? Where it's hard to make the claim that laws, you can't make the claim that for the BLM protests that laws were followed, because laws were not followed, permits were not given, laws were broken, arrests were made, and here we are. And if you go to most city council meetings, will tell you Saratoga is a racist city. It's under the investigation of the AG. Well, that's politically, unfortunately, that's where we're at, especially in this state, in this city.
And it is unfortunate too, because we're under investigation to determine if people's civil rights were violated. It's this whole, presumption of guilt, I guess, because of an investigation, which is always really troublesome to me. And I think has cast kind of an unfair reputation on the city.
It's absolutely unfair. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. Anyway, there was also a city council meeting last night, and Dan, you were the man and went and watched it for us, which I really, really appreciate.
I caught most of it, not all of it. It was a largely uneventful, at least for the periods I saw. Some speakers, some spirited speakers, but respectful anyway. Respectful mostly to their time and so forth. One significant thing that I felt was significant, that's relevant here to all of our discussions, is Commissioner Montanino, and I'm going to read this here. He announced a public safety forum with the Saratoga Springs Police Department leadership on September 6th at the Music Hall at 6 p.m. And this is to address, fulfill item number 45 of the recommendations of the 50-point plan contained in the reinvention plan toward a community-centered justice initiative. He did not go into the form of that, what the structure, so forth. He just announced it, and that's really just a couple weeks away. I don't know what you guys think. That I guess it's good that they are continuing to address that plan, because when there were items that were languishing for over a year, that was wrong.
I'm confused.
I'm sorry.
What's the purpose of it? I'm sorry. I'm confused.
Basically, public police interaction, I believe, communications between the police and the public, a public safety forum. But in the 50-point plan, and Commissioner Montanino didn't mention this, and it mentioned that there has to be a youth component to this. Doesn't mean that the fact that he didn't mention doesn't mean that there won't be, but he didn't expand on that, at least for the period that I was at the meeting, as to how youth will be involved. But basically, I think communication between the police department and the community is the gist of it.
So I would show up at this meeting to express concerns, express support, or just what?
Good question. He for the period I was there, he did not go, or the period I watched, when I think I caught that part online, he did not go into specifics. Maybe we should follow up with him next week. We won't invite him on. He was just on, but we can ask him some questions to that, because I don't know if anyone else has. Maybe it'll be answered by the time we go next week.
Well, I just have to say one quick thing, and I don't know if you guys have been noticing this at all, but the SSPD has stepped up their social media game so massively over the last couple months / year or two. I mean, it is good. Their social media is legit. I mean, not only are they putting out, and these were things that I talked about with the, at the time, sergeant who was running social media, and had kind of, like, when I came on board, they kind of decided they were going to kind of reinvest in social media as a channel to communicate with the public, especially Facebook. And some of the things we talked about are now like actually happening. For instance, they're doing things where they're introducing police officers and talking about the reason why they decided to become police officers. They're obviously updating people on crimes as they happen, but they're also doing investigation updates. And they're talking about crimes that happened that have now been through a trial, and the person's been found guilty and they've been sentenced to jail. So they're giving updates on cases that happened a while back. They're giving updates on what happened. And they're also giving updates on how the police have been involved in the community and what they're out there doing with different groups, with kids groups, with, different organizations. And I have just been like so impressed by them. So if you don't follow the SSPD, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, and they're on Facebook. If you don't follow them on those social media channels, I highly recommend it, because it's not just fluff stuff. It's really informative and productive content that they're putting out, as opposed to the city of Saratoga Springs, who suck at social media. City of Saratoga Springs, you suck at social media. I don't know who you hired as your communications director, but you got to get it together, because you're doing a piss poor job.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about, going back to the police. I know where you're coming from with this. The city seems to be an outlet for Mayor Kim ribbon cuttings. It seems to be very heavy on that. But I think the police, and rightfully so, realize in this day and age, you can't, how information is disseminated now. We used to have a kind of an impartial free press. I think that's gone. I think that the people who do beats like the Times Union and Wendy Libertaires of this world are run. It's not journalism they're running. It's for the shock value. And it's very politically motivated. So the police can't depend on local media anymore to give out fair and balanced stories of what's going on. And the way people consume information now and news now is all over the place. We've talked about this many times, not just picking up a local paper anymore. So, I was at the homeless shelter, the Rise Homeless Shelter, and the SSPD played a basketball game. And I will say Tim Cole was there for that event. And the police played our homeless residents. And it was not only that, Dan, you appreciate that. They played in full gear, most of them. I was expecting them to come in shorts and T-shirts, and it was hot. This is mid-August. And they're playing with their vests on. Now, I've known this from my travel over Ukraine. Bulletproof vests, boy, they can weigh.
They're so heavy.
Yeah, you've worn them, Robin. I've
worn them a lot. They're super heavy.
Yeah,
they have the strike plates and so forth. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Now they were using soft plates, but nonetheless. Now I will say,
still playing basketball in that. Yeah,
there was one resident who, my gosh, that guy could ball. I mean, he was making our SSPD look bad on the ball court, but they look real good in the view of the public opinion there, because this is them integrating with our community, integrating with our most vulnerable, and really doing what we Saratogians want our police force to do, and that's be more than just enforcement of the law, but to make the city a better city. So,
and you want to know how I knew about that? Social media. They put it on their social media. That's how I said that's.
Back to that point, Robin, where is this coming from, this increased effort, this increased energy towards a really effective social media campaign? Is it the new chief, or does it predate him?
So when I was there, Sergeant Angela McGovern decided to kind of take over social media. And I'd say at the time, it wasn't like she got any extra money for doing it. It wasn't like a position that, she was able to fill and get compensated for. She was just doing it because she knew it would be for the betterment of the department. And so when I was there, she was the one that was getting it going, and she was really doing a terrific job. She's since been promoted. And so my guess is that she's probably handed it off to somebody else, but it's internal, it's within the department. And I've just been really, really impressed by it. I mean, they're just doing a fantastic job. So kudos to them on that. And in terms of the city, I hate to just complain about the city council and whatnot, but I'm just going to go ahead and complain again. Here's what bothers me a lot. During COVID, I used my social media channels, especially Facebook, to update people on what was going on with COVID on a daily, sometimes multiple times a day basis, whether it was through Facebook Lives, where we had people interacting with questions and answers, or whether it was just straight posting, or whether I was emailing people through the city's email channels. People could sign up for COVID updates. For several months, I was sending out an email every single night with what the numbers were in the city, county, state, et cetera. And the amount of engagement it got and the amount of people it reached, was astronomical. And people were so grateful that they were getting this information, and that this outbound and inbound communication channel was open. And it's a free thing. It's not like it costs any money. It just so happened that I had the skills to do it, and I know how to build graphics and all that stuff. And I have a background where I know how to generate this content, but it was so necessary. And I handed over the Department of Public Safety social media channels to Jim Montanino. He's let them languish and die. Nothing has happened. He has not posted anything or done anything with them since I left office, which is really just like a bummer. Makes me sad, that happened. But then the city hired someone to be the communications director, which was something I would have loved to have had when I was in office, because there was a point where I was writing press releases for other departments, where I was doing graphics for the city in general, which is just kind of insane. Like, you shouldn't have a commissioner literally doing graphic design for the city at the same time that they're being commissioner. It's just like nutso. But anyway.
During COVID.
During COVID, no less.
Yeah.
So they hired a communications person, and one of their primary focuses is supposed to be social media channels, because again, they're one of the most direct links you have to the public to communicate valuable information. And there's so much information about services, about meetings, about, just close your eyes and point, any number of things the city offers, or people have questions about, whether it's taxes, whether it's licensing, whether it's parking,
this meeting that Jim Montanino has, right?
What's that?
This meeting that we talked about that Jim Montanino has.
Exactly. Yeah. The design review meetings, all the land use board meetings, the civil service commission meetings, the city council meetings. There's so much information that could be going out on these social media channels. But instead, what do we get? We get basically a replica of the Chamber of Commerce Facebook, which is great for the Chamber of Commerce, but totally inappropriate for the city of Saratoga Springs, which is Mayor Ron Kim showing up at ribbon cuttings for various businesses, cutting the ribbon and celebrating. And yeah, that's a part of his job as mayor. People want him there. They want him there at ribbon cuttings, etc. But that is totally not appropriate content for the city to just constantly be churning out. That's what the Chamber of Commerce puts out. That's what the Downtown Business Association puts out. That's what those own businesses themselves put out. But that should not be 90% of the city's social media content. And it really, when you take a step back and you look at it, it really looks like it's just Ron Kim campaigning via the city's Facebook channels, which is a violation of the ethics code and is not permissible per our city charter. So it's just really a shame. Sorry, this is Dillon texting me. Email, guys, one sec. Can you guys take over for 1 second?
Sure.
You know where I was going with that. They have to do a better job.
Yeah.
Do a better job.
My question is, and Dan, I don't know, this is probably would be better, but how does the city charter, written well before social media, apply to social media? Has there been precedent set for it? Robin, did you hear my question?
What was your question?
How would social media is a fairly new entity, right? And so it's come out well after our city charter was written. It's come well after a lot of the election laws and campaigning laws were written. How does New York State, how does Saratoga ordinances, laws apply to social media? Right. Are there applicable statutes that can be used for precedents?
Yeah, we have a pretty clearly written social media policy.
So Saratoga did adopt a social media policy.
Oh yeah, we did.
Is it updated? Is it effective? Or
yes, it is updated, and it should be effective. Oh, hold on, you guys. I'm just.
Let me just say that something that people don't know. I don't know if you two are part of this. It's along the lines of social media. You can sign up for email alerts in maybe 80 different categories on the city website, from hydrant flushing to boil water advisories to meetings of active committees and inactive committees that haven't met in 5 years. There's still categories there for those, and I'm on all of them. I selected all. Some of them are not used even when they should, and I did prod the certain departments like, hey, you have this issue that you announced on Facebook, good, but you also haven't, I also opted into that via email and you didn't use that function, so you're paying for it. Use it.
So you know what it is? So it's actually kind of confusing to do those signups. I think a little bit. It's not very user friendly, but there are all these different categories. So if you want an alert about street paving, if you want an alert about, again, there's a million different categories. But you have to have departments who understand how to use that function and use it to email out. We just had Commissioner Moran log on, so I'm going to bring him in if that's all right with you guys, because I know we've been gabbing for a while here. Hold on one sec. Commissioner Moran, can you hear us?
I can. Thank you so much. Sorry about the disconnect there on the technology. I caught up by the day's work. So
No problem at all. We're just happy to have you on. So this is kind of off subject, but we were just talking about the city's social media, and I just wanted to kind of put a plea. I know this isn't under your department. I know that the Facebook page falls under the mayor's department, but I kind of just wanted to put this plea out to you, Commissioner Moran. I would just love it if the city were able to put more productive and informative social media posts out and less of just the constant ribbon cutting, because there's so much that goes on at City Hall that people need to know about, whether it's meetings, whether it's parking information, whether it's, permitting information, licensing information. There's so much that people could know about that would be applicable to put out via social media channels. And none of that stuff goes out. It's all just truly 90% are just ribbon cuttings. And that's not helping anybody. That's not helping residents.
yeah, again, I think that's a fair statement. We just recently brought on the communications administrator. She's just getting up to speed in her job. So, I would give her a little bit of runway. At the same time, there's been criticisms of other members of the city council about perhaps misuse of the social media channel.
Right.
I was very started when we came into office because I understand some of those issues. You yourself were kind of caught up with switching one account to another account, what's appropriate and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked for was that we would be unified in how we would go about it. And so, for instance, there was a well-established DPW Facebook page. We set up an accounts one, but I wanted it administered in a consistent way. And so we hadn't launched it yet because there wasn't kind of that buy-in at any given point. She's not taking, a hold of that, and you'll start to see some changes there. But I agree with you. So many things that my department does are the customer-facing aspects of City Hall. And I want to be able to better engage and make it easier for the citizens to engage government. There was a question last night that came in over the Zoom and the question statement, during the public comment period. And, once I saw it, because this one was the first one that came over Zoom, I could see what the potential topic was, and it applied to fireworks, which is something that I've worked very hard on over the last year to bring back into existence within the city. Yet, it's not everybody's cup of tea. There are animals. I have animals that get frightened by fireworks. There are folks who have PTSD and other similar sort of maladies. I want to make more people aware of those things and make it easier for them to know a display is going on. Now, the one that happened was at the Golf and Polo Club, which is a private event. In the past, I've only announced special events that are public. Going forward, for instance, I'm going to be making announcements about fireworks anytime they're permitted within the city, so people have advance notice and can take precautions if need be. But that's an example of simple stuff that really we ought to do a better job of disseminating. And it's hard. It's really difficult to hit all those things.
The fireworks would actually be amazing because I personally I love fireworks visually, but I'm terrified of the noise factor. But every time fireworks go off, there's always people freaking out, trying to figure out where they're coming from. And so it would be so great if there was there was just some announcement, as to what was coming up so people could be aware. I think that would be super appreciated.
Yeah, no. And again, whether it's how do I get a marriage license, right on down through how do I grieve my assessments.
Yeah.
A lot of things that we could be disseminating and doing a better job of. I think that's very fair.
Well, thank you.
If I could jump in here on this issue, as you were talking, both of you, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know I follow the police department on Facebook. How many Facebook accounts, just sticking with one social media channel, does this city have? And is there a master list that the public can say, geez, I want to follow these first 5, but I don't want to follow these other 3? Is there a master list, Commissioner? And
no, there's not, Dan.
I just don't know.
That's kind of what I want to drive. But that's not there. There's a DPS page, there's a DPW page, and then there is the city page.
And the DPS page, sadly, I started and handed over, but it has not been used. It's just sat there. empty for a year and a half, which is sad for me. Anyway, but it would be nice if
department has one, and I believe firefighters have one. So those would be the other
Yeah.
associations I'm aware of.
Yeah. Anyway, one other question. I'm sorry, we've been talking about I just have one other kind of random question for you. So if people have a demonstration of any kind, right? Who doesn't matter what the group is. And It's like 50 people, whatever. And they have a demonstration or a protest and they don't file a permit with your department. And it's not like approved by the city the way sometimes events are approved, or sometimes people file for a declaration of protest, or I forget what they're called.
Yep.
Is there a means? I mean, I wasn't aware of this as a tool, but is there a means to then be punitive after the fact because they haven't filed?
Here's the thing. Let's make something very clear. The First Amendment exists to protect speech.
Right.
Popular, well-liked speech doesn't need protection. It's the
Right.
speech that is offending to some or is perhaps not popular in a given moment that the protections exist. Very, very clearly, the actions taken, was it 2 weeks ago, were political, period. There's, unless you want to call it a clown show, it was not a parade. There was nothing other than a political intent behind the actions of those folks. That's protected speech,
Right.
period.
Right.
And choose to exercise that. I think that we as a community right now, we have questions about what's appropriate, what we can and can't do in terms of provisioning that right. I know as a government, we do have the ability to define time, place, and manner. And I'll just use an example for you of what or how that could be administered. The Back to Blue rally that occurred a couple of years ago ended with a confrontation in Congress Park, at least through somewhat of a response protest to that action, right?
Yeah.
People walking into the park, people confronting them. The men and women in our police force were fundamentally stuck in between them.
Yeah.
Serving as that barrier. That's not acceptable to me.
Yeah.
Human beings in harm's way. I don't want to create situations for conflict. Our country is created by and strengthened by this tough discourse, right? We test the limits of what we really want to be as a society through that expression of our First Amendment right. When we look at other communities that do stuff like this, where there are contentious cases, there's a big courthouse waiting for the Supreme Court to come down with a ruling, or a state court.
Like a zone.
Position A is over here in this cordoned off fenced-in area.
Yeah.
Position B is over here, and there's fences and space separating.
Totally.
That's really what I would like to get to.
Totally.
That takes a lot, and there's no criticism coming from me in terms of sort of 2020 hindsight. It's just thoughts that I have, and I'm just using that situation as an inference. But going back to the original question, declaration of demonstration is the proper term. We ask that people who are going to go out do that. They file a declaration of demonstration. There's no cost. There's no restrictions other than perhaps if public safety weighs in and says, this, that, or the other thing. Again, time, place, and manner, which I do think is appropriate. But we need to gain, I think, better engagement with those who want to go out and express their First Amendment so that we can do it safely. That's the only thing I care about.
Let me jump in here real quick, because we had a disagreement on this. And as we know, the First Amendment also is not absolute. If you have so you can't rally to then go and storm City Hall, so everybody bring your guns, we're going to go study. That rally would not be.
Please
but that's the extreme version. But if you have a group like the Proud Boys, all right, and they have been proven to try to overthrow our government, have in the past have used violence in past rallies. Could you use that as a commissioner? Do you believe that you could use as a commissioner to deny? I mean, nobody seems to be applying for these permits on a regular basis anyway. But could you use that as a reason to deny a permit to gather?
My answer is probably going to be no. on First Amendment grounds until we get more guidance. We're under investigation. Don't think for a second that isn't hanging over the heads of us in terms of how we're going about doing what we do. The fact that Jim brought those charges against Chandler and then they're thrown out and there's still more pending against Lex is a demonstration to me that the position of allowing people to express their First Amendment right is paramount. And we need to protect that. The thing about the Proud Boys, Canada has declared them as a terrorist. The federal government nor the state government has declared them. And so the actions of someone who, might be aligned with you philosophically don't necessarily, implicate you as a violent person. And so, we as individuals have rights, and I believe in our freedoms, and it's my responsibility to make sure that those freedoms are protected, though I may not like the message or the messenger at all. It's unfortunate, but that's who we are as a society.
Caveat.
If I could jump in, Robin, I don't want. I just because I don't know how much time we have left. We're almost at 1:00. And Commissioner, to be fair to you, I want to stay on this topic, but hone it in a little bit. It's only last week I was asserted that at least 3 members of the city council, you being one of them, the mayor and Commissioner Montanino, are playing this circular game of gotcha with the Proud Boys thing, instead of standing together and communicating amongst each other. And it's only fair that I say that to you now, sure, and get your take on that. I don't think the 3 of you are leading well. Is my point.
I'm not interested in continuing any sort of arguments. Jim only communicates to us through the press, so I can only go by what he says. His story has changed repeatedly from the first story to the most current story about what went on and why. My comment only related specifically to the fact that the first statements I read were, "This was not important. I didn't bother calling."
Your assertion is fair. My point is, all of you are talking via press release. I don't know that you're talking to each other. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a constituent. I would ask the city council to work together on this issue with more unity than I've seen, rather than what I'm seeing is gotcha politics, including Jim Montanino. Commissioner Moran needs to sign the deposition. That's gotcha politics as well. I'll give the criticism to him. I'll give the criticism to you. I'll give the criticism to the mayor. I think we have the right to say, can you stand together on this and work together and communicate?
Dan, can I just bust in for a quick second?
I understand what you're saying. I'm standing with the people that have expressed the similar thoughts that I have, which are, this is a problem. Our community is not about hate. I renounce anything related to the message of, or the actions or the tactics of the Proud Boys and any other group like them. I also reject the notion that people aligned with Black Lives Matter who are seeking out specific protections within society is not the same thing. Though their expressions of their First Amendment and how they've comported themselves could be viewed as the same thing by any good intended person. I recognize why people would want to conflate the two. I personally don't, only because of this, the message behind the actions. I'm not excusing anybody's actions, but they're not the same message. One is a message of hate and get out of our country, and the other message is we want equality. So that they're 180 degrees polar.
I just want to jump in really quick and just say one thing about working together as a council. There were so many times when one or more of us on my city council would be like, we need to be together on this. We need to be together on this. But the fact of the matter is, the commission form of government sets you up to be in silos, and there's always someone going rogue. And so the idea of working together is so much harder in reality than it is, talking about it and wishing it is much easier than doing it in reality, especially with this form of government. So I can kind of empathize a little bit with what Commissioner Moran is going through, and having people kind of go rogue and go left and talk to the media and not work together, because it's just kind of how this system is set up. And it's really, really difficult to get everyone on the same page when, especially, when you're in between city council meetings, you can't talk to more than one person at a time. Otherwise, it's a quorum and you violated open meetings rules. So you're calling one person at a time, and you're going through all these people who all have like wackadoodle crazy personalities, trying to get them on the same page. And by the time you get to the fourth person, you're just praying that the first person you talk to is still on the same page. So acting together is just a lot harder done than said.
But shouldn't this issue transcend all that, Robin? It's such
I
an
would hope
important
so.
issue.
I mean, my God, I would hope so.
You would hope, but again, 4 of us have been very resolute about what we think about the Proud Boys.
Commissioner Moran, do you see this as a one-off? I mean, this group was from Troy. Commissioner Montanino stated that they follow them, they march in Boston Spa. Do we see this as a reoccurring? Do you have any insight of this was a one-off? I hope they don't come again, but I have no reason to think they haven't come again. Is there any indication that this might be a ongoing demonstration taking part in our streets?
I would say that hope is not a plan. I think it's our responsibility to take a look at this and the potential that could be brought, because this group does have a background and a history of violent actions. They also have, and again, not to impugn the military, but they do have alignment with the military, and as much as former military people generally make up a good constituent of this group, that says to me that there's a regimen and a rigor to how they go about doing things. And if you look at their actions in the past, they do have a history of doing quote unquote test runs. So am I concerned about them returning? Yeah. Am I concerned about it being bigger? Absolutely. And I'm concerned about what that could do or what could happen within the community. It's only responsible to take that position. But what I will offer is that if they come back and they want to cause problems, they will have a problem. And we will be ready, because it is unacceptable that these types of expressions with the violence and any other sort of civic unrest is not acceptable. It just isn't. And words aren't violent. Actions are violent. And so that's safety. I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in violence. And there's a lot of things that scare me.
I will also say that
where we are as a society, the ride along that I did, I just saw a different sort of environment in the downtown area than I've ever seen in my life, living here my whole life. These are some tenuous times we're in, and we all have to be measured in our actions and words, and that's it.
I also just have to quickly say that at Sunday's Not on Our Watch rally that was really successful in many respects. There was somebody across the street who they didn't have Proud Boy, anything on them to indicate they were a Proud Boy, but they did have their face covered. They were very kind of camouflaged in what they were wearing, and they were videotaping the entire rally, videotaping people's license plates, and online indicated that they were doing that on purpose and that they would be coming back, which was not great, not great to see.
Their God is on trial. He's been indicted how many times now? And there are a bunch of Proud Boys that are going to be sentenced at the federal level. He's got a court.
I will say
influence of things that you can look at and say, hey, this is something we need to keep our eyes on.
And just let the record show, on Sunday, we did file a declaration of demonstration.
Absolutely. Explain to everybody how that works.
Yeah.
Exactly like a special use permit or a special event permit. I'm sorry, I'm conflating those two. It gets circulated and we talk through. And so the feedback that came off of that was, hey, there's a noise ordinance. You tended to use a bullhorn. Make sure it's not over this loud. That came from code enforcement. I actually spoke to Linda prior to the event, as well as the mayor did, and I know that there was engagement with the police department as well. And so that's the way we'd like things to happen in a perfect way.
We spoke with the police department, but we also came up with a long list of rules of engagement for how we expected people to behave at the rally. And the headline was to engage, not enrage. But it was also like, we're not going to bring weapons. We're not going to have drugs. We're not going to, it was a very long list of kind of, this is how we expect people to behave, because there were concerns that if Proud Boys showed up, we did not want people engaging with them or trying to pick a fight with them. And that was really important. And it was important for us that everyone kind of be on the same page in terms of what we expected from them in terms of behavior. So letting the police department know that and having a conversation with them so they understood how we plan to act, and just really communicating with all parties, I think is the safest and best way to go about doing any of these things. So
do I. And I think if Black Lives Matter or any other civic organization wanted to have an action, I really would like engagement with them so that we make sure the event happens safely. And if there happens to be a counter voice to their action, let's accommodate that as well in a way that is safe, protects people's right, but also keeps the community safe. And you got to be proactive. And so I reach out to, I haven't spoken to the head of the Proud Boys yet, but obviously you guys understand I do have engagement.
I'm not sure he's taking our calls.
Well, I don't anticipate he would either.
Commissioner, I have a question regarding this issue in last night's city council meeting. A speaker spoke, and I may mischaracterize what he said, but I sort of understood what he said. Something like,
they're not
maybe we're all feeding this, both the politicians as well as the media, us. Here we are 11 days later, still giving this group all sorts of press, all sorts of attention. And I'm not saying we ignore it, but are we feeding it, I guess is the question, by giving it too much. Therefore, they're getting the attention they want. We're helping them recruit, in essence.
Yeah.
Is that something we need to be concerned about?
I think that's a great question. My initial inclination was to do exactly that. Don't give them the breath at all, right?
Yeah.
But, one of my fellow commissioners was very impassioned about this issue and the message that this group puts out there and how it makes, essentially discriminated against parts of our society feel. He was specifically, Commissioner Golub was specifically aware of several families that were down in that area who were scared and sought shelter within a business because, they're with their kids. They've seen what these people have done. I know that he contacted both Deputy T2 and the chief of police on Saturday when it was happening. And that's how I learned about it. Jason texted me and said, this is going on. And then I went on social media, and I think I saw maybe that one video that was published at that point in time. So I know that the police department was notified on Saturday, yet again, we get a continuing changing story. So I've spoken with the police department. I know what they observed. I know how they responded, and I think that they responded appropriately. There's no gotcha politics on my end. I think it's disappointing, again, that we don't have the person in charge of public safety interested in sharing matters of public safety with anybody else on the city council. That's disappointing. That was the limit of what my criticism was, because frankly, I'm done arguing with that guy.
I'm going to change topics for a minute, because I know there was a lot of other good stuff that we wanted to talk about with you today, Commissioner Moran. And I think some of it had to do with one of my favorite things, cannabis.
Yes, ma'am. Again, kind of a shift in topics.
I know. Big left turn.
But, yeah, so we're very, very fortunate. I think being kind to everybody involved in the process, the state has not really done a great job as it relates to our move into legalized adult use cannabis market. And there's a lot of reasons why. But the position we find ourselves in now is there are different acronyms. So AUCC is an adult use cannabis cultivator. That would be a farmer in our parlance, right? These are not big corporations. These are human beings, family-owned farms that made the choice 1.5 years ago to enter in, get licensed, and be part of this new cannabis market. Well, they've done their job. And here we sit in August with 21, 22 dispensaries perhaps open. that's less than 10% what they were promised. They put the seeds in the ground. And so we essentially have 1/3 of the supply chain holding the bag and about to face, I think, fairly substantial losses of capital that they invested, time, product that's on their shelves. And so what happened is like 3 months ago, there's regular OCM meetings with the licensed individuals, that they're party to. And a local person, Scott Trifolo, who is an AUCC farmer in Saratoga Springs and happens to be very, very involved in the industry, was on one of those calls, and he and a couple other people advocated for the plight of these distressed farmers. And at that meeting, sort of the thought was germinated that they would create, at the time they were calling it a farmer's market for legal cannabis. Scott brought that to myself and Commissioner Golub. I went and I spoke with the other commissioners and the mayor, and we were all, because we're a host community, we're like, yeah, let's find a way to do it. And so we didn't have rules, but we knew the sort of the intent and kind of the framework of what it would be. Unfortunately, it took the state 2 months for them to give us the rules for this emergency action. But in doing so, we were already ready, and Scott immediately sent in his application. We were one of the first 2 approved in New York State. Then that lawsuit relating to the veterans return hit, and everything is paused. So New Paltz and ourselves are the only 2 places that have this opportunity to help these distressed farmers. Long story short, what we did is we quickly sort of ascertained, if we did it on city land, it complicates it. We wanted to make it easy by doing it on city land. But when the rules came out, it basically said, any place you're doing X, Y, and Z, you can do it. There's no zoning. We're not going to put up.
Wait, I want to jump in. When you say it, you mean essentially a booth set up selling marijuana and cannabis products, right? Like a farmer's market for weed. Exactly what you said.
Yeah. So but that's exactly it, Adam. I'm sorry. They are.
You said it. I just wanted to make sure I heard it correctly, I guess. Yeah, so did Dalton up there.
We put in touch with Ryan McMahon at the City Center. Ryan hosts events all the time. That City Center parking garage was built so the first floor could host events. It seemed like a really good matchup, and they were able to establish a lease. So they had a separate lease. Scott got the license awarded to him on August 4th. Again, happened a lot quicker than we expected. And now we're trying to stand it up. So what's going to happen is you can envision, and we're on Excelsior staring at the parking garage. To the right of the center stairwell will be a fenced-in area. We got very nice looking fencing. It's gonna fit that brand expectation for Saratoga Springs in terms of look and feel. In order to apply, he had to associate himself with 3 separate farmers. But because of the interest and the notion that at Saratoga, we're probably going to be somewhere between 10 to 13 farm stands set up. Wow. Those will be selling flower and pre-rolls, so products that can be produced by the farmer themselves. And then there is going to be one AUCP, adult use cannabis processor. This would be that vertical element between a dispensary and a grower that makes the gummies, the seltzers, the chocolates, those ancillary products. So there's going to be one of them, and the rest will be farmers. And
that's freaking awesome.
Yeah. So we worked hard to make this turn out right.
We could have a trifecta with the Fish concert, Travers, and any chance this will be by then?
We actually eliminated that weekend from consideration.
Okay, good call. We don't need all the fish people up in our business. This is for locals.
We were targeting the 20th, which coincidentally is my birthday, so that would have been
20th of September, yeah?
But no, the 20th of August we were targeting. But so just so everybody understands how regulated the industry is. So I had written a letter for Mr. Trifolo to use as a means to market this or get folks to sign on board so he could make the application. Because there have been so many promises. A lot of people were like, I'm not wasting my effort or time in any area where I don't think I'm going to get payback, specifically the farmers, because they're working their butts off on this year's crop. So once sort of the messaging came out that this was real, he was inundated with interest. So we went from 3 to a line of people wanting to get in on it. What has to happen is each individual farmer says, okay, this is what I'm bringing that day. That data has to then get uploaded into the system, because from the seed to sale, this is traced within the New York State program.
Right.
So there's no on-site cash payments. Everything will go through a point of sale system that is approved by New York State. The taxes that are requisite to this sale will remain within Saratoga Springs and Saratoga County. So this is generating revenue we did not anticipate. How much will generate, that's to be determined. But I think if you looked at the first dispensary that's been open 6 months reported 12 million in sales, which relates to would be $720,000 to the host municipality.
Holy shit.
Will this be repeated, or is this a one-time event?
So we are authorized to conduct this from now through December 31st as it's, and it will be open at initially on Sunday and on Tuesday. We didn't want to have any sort of overlap with the existing farmers market and the crowd of people that comes for that. And so we really wanted to sort of assign specific dates that it could stand on its own and obviously not take away from someone else's event.
Okay.
We're going to there, and then 12 to 6 is the operating hour.
I gotta say, screw the Proud Boys. We buried the lead here, people. We majorly buried the lead here. You're telling me that Robin Dalton can walk out of her house, walk 3 blocks over to the parking garage on Sundays and Tuesdays, and can enjoy a cannabis farmer's market? Yes,
ma'am.
I mean, I'm doing a happy dance.
Yeah, I never thought in my lifetime either. The experience of working with the current license holders, it's really interesting to be at the forefront of a new market being created and seeing the entrepreneurs that are stepping out front and the challenges that they have. And while I'm very, very clearly an advocate for this market and for small business, I need to play the role of government. And in my view of this market and the way that the state's already regulated it, my job is to keep government out of it as much as I possibly can and allow the statutes that are already in place just to run their course. And so, we're working through how our zoning matches up to actually existing state law. And it took the first card applicant or the first permit applicant in front of the planning board to see that there may be a little bit of misalignment between our zoning and how it's written versus how the law is written. And again, to the credit of the city council, they saw marijuana coming and included it in the zoning, but we didn't have the regs yet. So it's hard to project where the state may go. And what I mean by that is this first justice influence license holders. It literally says in the law you can't be prejudicial against them because it's a cannabis-based business, i.e. you can't express bias to say this doesn't belong next to that. Nor can you put any sort of hurdle in front of them that a normal business wouldn't already have. And how this relates to our zoning, right now they're required to have a special use permit and a site plan approval. These are renters. So I think, frankly, with the way the law is written, those things don't apply to them because they already go through a site evaluation from the state related to security and all these other issues, probably a 1.5-year screening process to get open themselves. This is that first group, that justice influenced individual where there's specific laws written about them. The commercial people who are going to be next to kind of come into the market, it probably makes sense because they're going to be building structures and things like that the special use permit and the site plan and all that stuff comes into play. But right now, I'm not sure that it does. So we're evaluating that to make sure that we're treating these folks fair and as intended by the law.
Let me ask you. Let me play devil's advocate for a second, right? So we're gonna have this cannabis farmers market, and you have the 9/11 memorial down there in the park there, and you have apartments across the street. Well, that day, let's say I have small kids and I have an apartment across that street, and that park now, High Rock Park, has a lot of people smoking marijuana. There's a lot of smoke. This is something like, I know marijuana in New York State is essentially legal to smoke anywhere cigarettes are. But when I drink a beer, the beer is not affecting people around me. Is there any thought being given to how the smoke generated from this will it affect the pedestrians who don't wish to partake in this? And is there anything being done to counter that?
So there's no consumption on site at this event. High Rock Park is a city park. I don't believe you're allowed to smoke in that.
Thank you. I was just going to say that. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I was just going to say that.
Parks, you're not allowed to smoke.
Yeah, you're not allowed to smoke in city parks.
So you're talking about general enforcement issues now to actually answer that question, because again, I've grown up in a world where marijuana is illegal. And so the sight of people walking down the street, puffing on a joint or whatever, I can understand why that's off-putting, because it's still odd to me. And should there or could there be some retraction on that? Yeah, I think it's logical. That's maybe something that is discussed. I think we may have the ability to do that on the local level, but I do know that the conversation is going on the state level as well. Because again, let's be honest, it's not for everybody, and that we have open container laws. There's a lot of things that, left to
I'd be more concerned. Listen, I have a lot of libertarian beliefs. If you want to smoke weed, smoke weed. I don't care. It's when that smoke, may affect my children that some people might start to care. But but you're saying that is being looked at, and we're in the infancy of this. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I think this is a great thing that you've done for our city. It's going to generate revenue, as you said, so I'm all for it. But just wanted to clarify that point.
I also just quickly have to say on that topic, having 4 kids, and I live on Lower Caroline Street. Walking up and down Caroline Street every day, they are already experiencing pot smoke like constantly, whether it's from vape or someone smoking a joint or whatever. And it is a problem. But to me, it's way less of a problem than the drunk people we have to deal with on Caroline Street, because we may not see them drinking alcohol outside, but we have to deal with their behavior outside all the time. And we have to walk through their puke on the street all the time. So when I rank the order of issues we have in Saratoga, although I am bothered by the pot smoke and I'm bothered by the fact that my kids have to inhale it and smell it, it's lower on the list than it is dealing with the drunk people and the aftermath of the drunk people we have on Caroline Street.
Can you create a graphic next week, Robin, of the issues on Caroline Street that you tolerate? And
I would love to. Well, listen, Commissioner Moran, we're running out of time here, but I am so appreciative of your coming on. And I think that this cannabis farmers market just solves so many problems in a really creative and innovative way. And so I thank you for doing it. And I thank you personally for doing it. I am a marijuana smoker. I do not drink alcohol. I'm allergic to alcohol. I break out in hives all over my body if I drink any kind of alcohol. But also I have a lot of stomach issues and I have a medical marijuana card. But even with a medical marijuana card, it's still kind of tricky to go down to, I think Clifton Park is the closest dispensary in terms of getting any kind of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a real hassle. And so I think this is awesome. And I think even better, it generates tax revenue for the city. And my understanding from at least when we were on the city council is that a lot of that generated revenue, a lot of that actually is earmarked for public safety, which I think is fantastic.
I don't think it's earmarked per se, but I personally think it's entirely justifiable because, listen, we have 2 things on the... I believe government exists ostensibly for public safety. That's why people started living in congregation.
Sure.
When we look at our community and we look specifically at public safety, we've grown. We're finally doing something to address the needs of, let's call it the Eastern Tier. And we're going to stand that up. Well, we have to have a plan to fund that. So last night we created an assignment so that we can start to put money in the piggy bank, if you will. I think it's entirely appropriate that we earmark monies coming from this segment to that. Reasons why is because we know there's going to be the need to direct a little traffic, maybe a little bit at the openings of some of these, but we can't necessarily get to where we need to get to from a budgetary standpoint just through tax collection because we have a tax cap. And so we need to develop new sources of revenue that can help us budget, balance the budget. And here's one that, I'm not going to say it's a windfall because there's work that goes into it. And there's individuals that, again, are entrepreneurs that are putting themselves out there. But when we build this out, and I think we'll probably wind up with 5 to 6, it's going to be a significant revenue stream that we plan for, right? We shouldn't just put in the general fund without thoughts about it. And I really do think that the police department, in terms of our head count, significantly needs to be addressed, and we need to underpin over the long term the commitment that we've already made to the fire department.
But especially because so many of the surrounding counties have opted out of having dispensaries and whatnot. I think a lot of people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know. So I think a lot of people from around Saratoga Springs are going to be coming here, which will also increase the revenue that we're making. But I do think that one of the specifications was that some of the tax revenue be used to help develop ways in which we could tell if someone was high while they were driving. In particular,
from the state standpoint, yeah, I do believe.
Okay. Yes.
Research breathalyzer, if you will, because we know at present what we have is a blood test that it's at best a lifestyle test. It's not a sobriety test. So I think that's it's like everything. We do not want impaired people behind the wheel, and at the same time, we'd be ignorant to suggest that they're not there already. So, but the sort of the last thoughts on this are, because you bring it up, the strategy that we're employing is, I would like to keep the dispensaries, if you will, on the perimeter of the city, because of what you said. Generally going to be car destinations. People are going to be coming from external to the community, into the community, and people who live here can drive within the community. Yeah. But instead of bringing everybody downtown where we already have, let's just say, I would like to do that, but there's another thing coming out, which is the lounge. We still do not have definition for that. What I would say is that a dispensary is a liquor store, a lounge is a bar. We will likely look to broaden where those can be located, because those should really be a walk-up type location, because it's an on-site consumption location. It's the way it's envisioned. I don't want to go put that out on West Ave, have somebody go out there, partake, and then their move is to get in a car. That's not okay.
Right.
So we're really still thinking through that. We're looking for definitions and guidance from the state. But if I were to look at our first two openings, I would bet money that we have a place open. As most of you know, there's been an application on 95 West. I believe that is going to prove successful. And I think the second location is going to wind up being a delivery-only dispensary, which I think is going to be the preferred mode within the city, quite frankly, because of the discretion.
Who doesn't like delivery?
Yeah, right. I mean, you just
add it right on to DoorDash.
Right. Yeah. And again, this is an authorization that the state has brought forward since the original rules, because they recognize it's really difficult to stand one of these things up. For instance, we're victims of our own success. There's not a lot of retail spaces available, but some of the ones that have underpinned by FDIC insured loans. They're not going to allow the selling of adult use cannabis for a Schedule I drug. So they can't go into those places. And so it's challenging. It's really challenging to find locations for folks.
Have you looked at, I've been to Amsterdam and Holland a number of times. Some place like that's had years of history with kind of perfecting what these lounges look like, because I think they do a good job there in separating the entities of the nightlife and the bars and the lounges.
Holland or Amsterdam, but we're the first people in America to do this. So I believe Nevada authorized at the same time we did, and I think there's one lounge in Los Angeles. Other than that, we're really making it up as we go along, and so that's why I'd like guidance, and I'd like to be able to make decisions versus what we think, because it's important. I want it to be successful. I want it to be a positive addition to the community. I believe it will be. If you look at the nature of downtown, I would like to see less alcohol and more tempering of that alcohol, perhaps with a marijuana, which is inherently kind of a less aggressive sort of inebriation.
Yeah. Listen, on my Caroline Street chart that I'm going to do for next week, I will also rank my favorite people on Caroline Street in terms of groups. And my favorite group are the Dead and Company people, because when the Dead and Company people come, they are so chill, because for the most part, they're smoking pot. They're so relaxed. It's a totally different vibe on Caroline Street. And I think it was not this summer, but last summer, the Dead and Company show got canceled like last minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they all came downtown and I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a disaster. No, it was not a disaster. They were lovely. They couldn't have been nicer. And everybody wrapped up around 10:30 and went home. Like, it was the best crowd ever. And it just it did to me really demonstrate the difference between a crowd that's fueled by alcohol versus a crowd that's fueled by marijuana. It really presents differently in terms of the behavior you see out and about. So I'll make sure to include that on my little graph for next week.
Yeah. Understand a lounge can't have alcohol in it and vice versa. So these would be separate. That you wouldn't like, sort of first floor of the or second floor of the city center or the city tavern suddenly is now a lounge.
Right.
And it's a separate standalone business that would operate on its own.
Well, listen, Dan had to go because he had a hard out at 1:30. I've got kids texting me like, are you still podcasting? But I'm so appreciative of all of your time today, Commissioner Moran. And this is such exciting news. And I think it'll do great things for the city in terms of people who are looking for this product, but also in terms of revenue. So
real quick, the 20th, is that set in stone? I mean, when should people?
No, it was the original date we were targeting, Adam. I made that. It was my birthday. I was like, I can't believe this is going to happen on my birthday.
Right. But conservatively.
Yeah, well, we eliminated that weekend, Traverse weekend. There's just too much going on.
Yeah.
And we can't put that on the police at this point.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to start. Let's just start on the 2nd. Let's put all our effort into a really good launch. Let's have a nice event.
September.
Opening of it, and also gives more time for people to ask questions and make sure that everyone is at least cognizant of what's going on, if not entirely comfortable.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. We really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the podcast again.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk to you soon, and appreciate the opportunity to communicate.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Adam, this is big news.
Yeah, I know. Wow, you must be psyched. It is. I think that's. Listen, I don't like. I'm not a big weed smoker, but I think this is where we're going, and I'm gonna start calling Commissioner Rand Tom Thumb, because when he's good, he's great. He does a lot of good for the city. When he's bad, he can be awful, but when he's on and really being ahead of this stuff, and I've talked to a farmer who actually, he was an organic farmer who the farm next to him was exactly this scenario. They invested their life savings into growing cannabis, and their whole life, they're about to go bankrupt. So
they're totally fucked. Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, well, I got to get going too. So I think we'll just cheers the farmers market, huh?
Yeah, we'll do a quick cheers and cheers for the farmers market. I was also just going to do a quick cheer to Linda Latender. Linda Latender, you rock. You inspire me. She helped organize the rally on Sunday, but she's also just organized so many rallies over the years, and she's great
just lady. She helped me a lot with what I did in Ukraine. She's just all around making the world a better place.
Yeah, thank you, Linda Latender. You're our cheer for this week. I don't really have any cheers that I can think of off the top of my head. Do you?
Nah, I'm good.
Right, let's end on a high note, shall we?
And then a high note, I like it.
All right, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Oh, it's just me now.